This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 1986 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 1986. We also look at the case for putting Motorhead into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and our Spotlight Museum this week is the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. In music for the year 1986, hip-hop broke into the mainstream with hit albums like Run DMC's Raising Hell and the Beastie Boys' License to Ill. Other important albums were released by Africa Bambaataa and Soul Sonic Force, Salt and Pepper, Stetsasonic, Kool Moe Dee, Houdini, UTFO, The Fat Boys, and Grandmaster Flash. Alternative music, also known as college radio back in the day, began to show up on mainstream radio stations, with artists like R.E.M. getting modestly popular before becoming superstars in the early 1990s. Dance music was still the domain of pop and R&B artists doing remixes. However, in the clubs, house and trance music filled the speakers, with both genres starting out in the black, Latino, and gay dance clubs in the beginning, and definitely not in the mainstream. Not as of yet. The Phantom of the Opera musical premiered in London, England. It hit Broadway in 1988. The Monkees went on a reunion tour after gaining renewed popularity from MTV running their original TV show from the 1960s. Bob Geldof was given knighthood by the Queen of England for his efforts to end hunger in Africa. Queen, the band, played their final concert with Freddie Mercury. The Smiths called it quits just as they were beginning to hit the mainstream. Also calling it quits in 1986 were Wham!, Black Flag, ELO, Electric Light Orchestra that is, Men at Work, Arcadia, Asia, Boney M., the Boomtown Rats, Thin Lizzy, Matumi, Utopia, The Clash, Confunction, Culture Club, Weather Report, The Dead Kennedys, Emerson, Lake and Powell, A Flock of Seagulls, Pablo Cruz, The Police, and Prince and the Revolution. At least one-third of those bands got back together to do those nostalgia tours that are popular these days. Who actually got together in 1986? Well, the Afghan Wigs, the Beatmasters, Big Head Todd and the Monsters, Climby Fisher, No Doubt, Company B, Cowboy Junkies, the David Lee Roth Band with guitarist Steve Vai, Eric B. and Rakim, Faster Pussycat, Frontline Assembly, The Ghetto Boys, Goo Goo Dolls, Jesus Jones, Johnny Hates Jazz, King Missile, The Lemonheads, Leaders of the New School, The Manic Street Preachers, M.O.D., 24/7 Spies, Morbid, N.W.A., Naughty by Nature, Nelson, The Pixies, Prong, Roxette, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Timbuk 3, T'Pow, Transvision Vamp, The Velt, Sweethearts of the Rodeo, The Sugar Cubes, Skid Row, Stabbing Westward, and Texas. Also, music magazine Q launched in 1986. According to Billboard magazine, That's What Friends Are For by Dionne Warwick and Friends was the biggest selling single of the year. The others were Say You, Say Me by Lionel Richie, I Miss You by Climax, On My Own by Patti LaBelle and Michael McDonald, Mr. Mister's Broken Wings, Whitney Houston's How Will I Know, Party All the Time by Eddie Murphy, Survivor's Burning Heart, Mr. Mister's Kyrie, Falco's Rock Me Amadeus, Madonna's Papas Don't Preach, Berlin's Take My Breath Away, The Pet Shop Boys with West End Girls, Mike and the Mechanics' All I Need Is a Miracle, Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone, Lionel Richie's Dancing on the Ceiling, Force MD's Tender Love, and Robert Palmer's classic Addicted to Love. Whitney Houston's debut self-titled album was actually the biggest selling album of the year. It was also the year of Hearts' self-titled album, ZZ Top's Afterburner, Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, Janet Jackson's Control, Mr. Mister's Welcome to the Real World, Sade's Promise, Phil Collins' No Jacket Required, and Gloria Estefan and Miami Sound Machine's album Primitive Love. It was also the year of the Top Gun soundtrack, with big hits by Kenny Loggins and Berlin, Madonna's True Blue album, Peter Gabriel's hit album So, the return of Van Halen with Sammy Hagar as the new frontman, Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet, which helped to usher the hair band era into the mainstream, and Steve Winwood had his comeback album that year with Back in the High Life. DJ Snake, DJ Alice in Wonderland, Lady Gaga, Drake, Ellie Goulding, Solange Knowles, Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine, Kelly Pickler, Skylar Grey, John Baptiste, Charlotte Church, Alex Turner of Arctic Monkeys, Ollie Sykes of Bring Me the Horizon, Matt Heffey of Trivium, Mario, violinist Lindsey Sterling, bassist Tal Winkenfeld, Kevin Parker, a.k.a. Tame Impala, David Jones of McFly, singers, actresses Cassie, Lea Michele, Leighton Meester, Lindsay Lohan, Emmy Rossum, Leaky Lee, and Stacey Orico, along with actress and DJ Ruby Rose and rapper Kevin Gates. All were born in 1986. Musical artists who passed away in 1986 included Cliff Burton of Metallica, who was killed when Metallica's tour bus was involved in an accident, Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy, Richard Manuel of The Band, entertainers Desi Arnaz, Kate Smith, Dean Reed, Gordon McRae, and Scatman Crothers, manager Albert Grossman, disc jockeys John R. and William B. Williams, guitarist Robbie Basho, record executive Moses Ash of Ash Records, also jazz trumpet player Thad Jones, singer Esquerita, saxophonist Eddie Lockjaw Davis, Tracy Pugh of the Saints, singer and blues guitarist Bea Booz, singer Lee Dorsey, Billy Rancher of Billy Rancher and the Unreal Gods, Hollywood Fats of Canned Heat, Tommy Kiefer of Crocus, Joe Farrell of Return to Forever, harpist Dorothy Ashby, jazz saxophonist Hank Mobley, guitarist Clarence Garlow, folk singer Kate Wolf, the King of Swing himself, band leader Benny Goodman, blues harmonica player Sonny Terry, O'Kelly Isley Jr. of the Isley Brothers, along with country guitarist Joe Maphis, Bobby Nunn of the Coasters, and singers Mark Dinning and Lee Dorsey. At the Grammy Awards for Music for 1986, Graceland from Paul Simon won Album of the Year. That's What Friends Are For from Dionne Warwick, Sir Elton John, Gladys Knight, and Stevie Wonder won Song of the Year. Steve Winwood won Record of the Year for Higher Love with Chaka Khan, and Bruce Hornsby and the Range won Best New Artist. At the Eurovision Singing Contest, which was held in Norway, Belgium won that year. At the Tony Awards, The Mystery of Edwin Drood won Best Musical, and Sweet Charity won Best Revival of a Musical. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Dire Straits' video Money for Nothing won Music Video of the Year. At the American Music Awards for the music of 1986, Whitney Houston, Lionel Richie, and Huey Lewis were the big winners. The Pulitzer Prize in Music was awarded to George Pearl for Wind Quintet No. 4 for flute, oboe, clarinet, horn, and bassoon, and George Rochberg for Symphony No. 5. 1986 was the inaugural class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though a physical museum wouldn't be open until 1995 in Cleveland, Ohio. The first ceremony was held on January 23rd of 1986 at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. Talent scout and record producer John Henry Hammond II, who was the father of famed blues musician John P. Hammond, was the first person inducted into the Non-Performer Lifetime Achievement Award category. Radio disc jockey Alan Freed, who held the first rock and roll concert and coined the phrase rock and roll in the mainstream, and Sun Records owner Sam Phillips were both inducted into the non-performers category. 10 members were inducted into the performers category of the Hall during its first year. They were Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Sam Cooke, Fats Domino, the Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis, James Brown, Elvis Presley, and Ray Charles. Jimmy Rogers and Jimmy Yancey were inducted into the Early Influencers category, as well as this next legend. Robert Johnson is one of those artists who it's tough to tell fact from fiction. That's because not a lot of his life was actually documented. In death, he has obtained legendary, almost mythical status. Here's what is known about him. He was born on May 8, 1911 in Mississippi. In 1929, he was married, but she died soon thereafter while giving birth to their child. It was at that point that Robert decided to become a blues guitarist. He fathered a child with another woman and married yet another one who again died while in childbirth. From 1932 to 1938, Robert helped to develop and define the Delta blues by playing every juke joint from Memphis all the way down to Mississippi. Robert was quite the ladies' man as well, with literally a woman in every city, with none of them knowing about the other ones. Remember, kids, no internet or social media at that time to put anyone on blast, so he mainly got away with it. Mainly. For all of his playing, Robert released very few records. On November 23rd through the 25th of 1936 in San Antonio, Texas, Robert recorded what would become the recordings that he would be known for. Supposedly, Robert was so shy that he faced the wall while recording. One of those songs was Crossroads Blues, which Eric Clapton would do a couple of versions of with his various groups. It was also the song that would become pivotal to his legend after his death in 1938. Of the many myths and legends about Robert, the most famous one probably concerns his deal with the devil at the local crossroads. He sings about it in Crossroad Blues. There's even a statue where the event supposedly took place. Robert's friends and relatives have said that he made the deal with the devil by playing secular blues music instead of gospel, and that his wives dying while in childbirth was punishment. There was talk by locals that Robert got his gift by going to grave sites at night and becoming infused with the talent of the dead. Even his death is shrouded in mystery, as he died from unknown causes in 1938 with no autopsy and with no public announcement. Some people say that he was poisoned by a jealous husband or boyfriend of one of his many conquests. Told you that he mainly got away with it, but not quite. Others, though, say that the devil came to collect on his deal. In any event, he lived quite the exciting life and left quite the exciting legacy. Presented for induction by singer Robert Palmer, Robert Johnson, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an early influencer in 1986. Before we get to the rest of the podcast, we'd like to tell you about our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast. Every day we tell you what happened on that date in music history, along with music releases, birthdays, and passings. So, if you like this podcast and want more music history, then please search the Music History Today podcast in audio or video form on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. This week, we're going to look at the case for putting Motorhead into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. England had a lot of economic struggles in the 1970s. The country had high unemployment, especially the youth, and there was a lot of social unrest with riots and strikes. The new heavy metal movement came from this strife. Groups like Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, and the like, and Motorhead came from that era and those times. Led by Lemmy, The group were ranked at number 26 on VH1's Greatest Artists of Hard Rock list. They influenced thrash metal, punk rock, and speed metal. They released 22 studio albums, 10 live albums, including their classic No Sleep Till Hammersmith, 12 compilation albums, and 5 EPs. They were nominated for 4 Grammy Awards, winning one of them. And if you are a thrash metal or speed metal band, you were definitely influenced by Motorhead. Their must-have albums to put into your collection include Bomber, Overkill, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, and probably their most famous album with their most famous song, Ace of Spades. Plus, if you're a wrestling fan, Motorhead did the theme music, The Game. That was Triple H's entrance music. Personally, I feel that the Hall was wrong to overlook Motorhead this year. So here's hoping that they do the right thing and actually put Motorhead into the upcoming class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week's Spotlight Museum is the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The museum is located on the National Mall, right across the street from the Washington Monument. The museum highlights the experience and contributions to specifically America and more broadly the world. A lot of the museum deals with slavery and civil rights. There's a slave cabin, an airplane that was flown by a member of the Tuskegee Airmen, as well as items pertaining to the military, religion, literature, and politics. The museum also has an extensive collection of artifacts concerning music. The museum boasts Chuck Berry's Pink Cadillac, stage costumes worn by Parliament Funkadelic, among others, along with other recordings, sheet music, photos, and such. There's also a great online resource on their website where they've put a lot of their collection online to look at. The museum is open daily as of this recording from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Admission is free. After all, your tax dollars paid for it. However, the only way that you can walk into the museum without a pass is if you show your military ID. Otherwise, you either have to try to get timed passes in the mornings that you want to go, which run out really quickly, or you can get passes in advance online. Check the museum's website, nmahc.si.edu, about their time passes, along with COVID admission information, since that's the world we live in these days. And, COVID regulations seem to change on a whim, especially in this era. In the museum's archives is an extensive photography collection of hip-hop historian and former Def Jam Records publicist Bill Adler. Bill amassed what can only be described as the largest and most important photo collection of hip-hop artists and culture of the 20th century. It has over 400 photographs covering hip-hop from the early 1980s to the early part of the 20th century. This collection comes on the heels of the museum's 9 CD and coffee table book box set on the history of hip-hop, along with photos and music from artists such as LL Cool J. The collection includes photos of this next group. The original nicknames to this group were DJ Run, Don of Curtis Blow, Easy D, and Jazzy Jace. In the early 1980s, there were 3 kids who grew up in Hollis, Queens. Joseph Simmons had an older brother named Russell, who was a hip-hop promoter and had started a record label with his college roommate Rick Rubin called Def Jam Records. Russell, at the time, promoted rapper Curtis Blow and needed someone to be Curtis's DJ. Joseph was actually recruited to be the DJ. Soon, Joseph wanted to rap. Russell let Joseph record one song, which went absolutely nowhere. In the meantime, Joseph had a friend named Daryl McDaniel. The two of them wanted to rap as a duo. And at first, Russell said no because he didn't like Daryl's rap style, but eventually they wore him down and he finally said yes. They needed a DJ, though, so they got their friend Jason Mizell. Russell then changed their nicknames. Joseph DJ Run, son of Curtis Blow, became Run. Daryl Easy D became DMC, and Jason Jazzy Jace became Jam Master Jay, and the group became known as Run DMC. For the record, though, they hated the name of the group, but it grew on them. They signed to Profile Records and released their first single, It's Like That. The song hit number 15 on the Billboard R&B charts. After that success, they released their first album, Run DMC, in 1984. That album had hits like Hard Times. It also had the transcending song Rock Box. With a mixture of hip-hop and hard rock, complete with the blistering guitar of session musician Eddie Paul Martinez, the song was one of the first to combine what were then, at least at that point, two separate worlds: black inner-city hip-hop and white suburban heavy metal. Both were considered dangerous in the eyes of the mainstream, which made them a perfect combination for kids. 1985 was a big year for the group from a career perspective. First, they released their next album, King of Rock, which further solidified their sound with the songs King of Rock and Can You Rock It Like This. They were then the only hip-hop act to perform at Live Aid. They followed that up with an appearance in the hit movie Crush Groove. 1986 saw their biggest success with one of the most important albums of the 1980s, Raising Hell. The album was produced by Rick Rubin, who had a major role in one of the most important songs of all time. The album was almost done when they decided to do one more song to pique interest from their fans who liked the hard rock sounds of King of Rock and Rockbox. After some discussion, they fell upon the idea of doing Walk This Way by Aerosmith. Originally, they were going to sample the song, but Rick and Jam Master Jay wanted to redo the song completely. They put out the call to Aerosmith to gauge interest. At first, there wasn't any. What has to be remembered is that in 1985, no one liked Aerosmith. Known as the Toxic Twins at that point, Aerosmith's Steven Tyler and Joe Perry were looked at as part of a group whose heyday was in the 1970s and had a lot of drugs, alcohol, and other internal band issues. They were at that point effectively done as a band. Even with their careers in freefall, Steven and Joe did not want to do the song because they hated hip-hop. To them, and a lot of other artists, mind you, hip-hop at that time was taking their songs, using them without paying the artists, and making money off of them. The Toxic Twins wanted no part of it. Rick actually convinced them to come into the studio to work things out. And once they saw how Jam Master Jay could cut the record precisely where he wanted the beat to be at will on the turntables, they were fascinated and wanted in on the collaboration. The music video also became iconic. The video unfolds with both acts on opposite sides of a wall. Then once Run DMC starts rapping loud to the beat, Steven breaks through the wall with a mic stand. Then everybody ends up on a concert stage together as a show of solidarity and breaking down the barriers between the rock and hip-hop cultures and black and white cultures, to be honest with you. Rumor has it was that Steven couldn't break down the wall at first, but they actually left that part in the final cut. The song, the album, and the music video all became huge hits, along with becoming icons of 80s music. It also gave Aerosmith their career back as the band got back together and started putting out hit songs like Lovin' an Elevator, Dude Looks Like a Lady, Angel, Jaded, among many, many, many others. After the success of Raising Hell, Run DMC put out Tougher Than Leather and Down with the King, but by then, the sound that the group had pioneered had already changed, and so did they. Run became a minister, while Jay became a producer, producing the group Onyx, who had the hit song Slam. The three guys started to not get along, and they started to go their separate ways musically. In 2002, Jay was shot and killed in his studio in Queens, New York. His murder was finally solved about 20 years later. Run DMC was one of the most influential hip-hop groups of all time. They influenced later rock-rap acts like Korn, Kid Rock, Limp Bizkit, The Prodigy, and others. They were the first hip-hop act on American Bandstand, the first hip-hop act to earn a gold record with Run DMC, a platinum album with King of Rock, and a multi-platinum album with Raising Hell. They were also the first hip-hop group to get played on MTV. They were the first hip-hop act to be nominated for a Grammy Awards, and their photos, along with other artists from the 1980s New York hip-hop scene, are in the archives of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And that is it for this episode of the Music Halls of Fame podcast. For more podcast episodes, which drop every Thursday in audio and video form, then please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, CastBox, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from.